Out in the parking lot of St. Augustine Medical Center, the Christmas Eve storm had turned Pittsburgh into a blur of white and yellow light. Snow drove sideways under the lamps, then vanished in the dark before it reached the ground. The lot was almost empty. Claire Monroe was not one of the people heading home. She kept her head down as she crossed the lot, shoulders hunched inside a padded jacket that had lost most of its padding. The zipper stuck halfway up, leaving a strip of sweater and skin to catch the wind. She held a dented Christmas tin tight under one arm, the cold metal biting through her glove. Her sneakers slipped on packed snow, and her free hand shot out to catch the side of a car, the metal icy under her palm. She steadied herself, pulled in one more breath of cold air, and moved toward the automatic doors, where warm air spilled out in brief gusts each time they opened. Inside the lobby, lights felt too bright. Salt clung in gray rings along the floor. A plastic Christmas tree blinked in one corner, its colored bulbs out of sync with the fluorescent light above the reception desk. Claire wiped her shoes on the mat before stepping onto the tile. The tin shifted under her arm, clinking softly. She adjusted her grip and walked past the security desk with a small nod. "Evening, Claire," the guard called, eyes flicking from the muted football game on his monitor. "Evening, Mitch," she answered. The clock above the elevators read 6:52 p.m., 8 minutes early. She liked being early. It meant she could catch her breath before the shift caught her. She rode the elevator up alone. In the stainless steel walls, her reflection looked a shade paler than usual, the faint smudges beneath her eyes darker in the harsh light. She tucked a loose strand of hair back behind her ear and shifted the tin from one arm to the other. The doors slid open on the third floor. The smell of disinfectant met her sharp and familiar. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in steady rhythm. The ER was 2 double doors away. Before she pushed through those doors, Claire turned into the small break room to the left. The room held mismatched chairs and a scarred table mottled with coffee stains. A microwave hummed in the corner beside a vending machine with a faded Happy Holidays sticker. Jessie Park was already there. She sat sideways on a chair, bright scrubs tucked under her, scrolling on her phone, while a paper cup of coffee cooled on the table. Another nurse leaned against the counter, telling some story under her breath and laughing. Both women looked up when Claire stepped in. "Look who made it through the blizzard," Jessie said. "Our very own dollar store nurse." The other nurse bit back a grin, eyes dropping to the tin in Claire's hands. Claire set the tin in the center of the table. The lid had once been red with snowflakes. Now the paint was scratched the metal along the edges, dulled to gray. She eased the lid off. The smell of cinnamon and toasted oats drifted into the room. "I brought cookies," she said. Jessie reached over and picked one up between 2 fingers, turning it like she was examining something delicate. "Well, they look homemade," she said, "from what the discount aisle." Her tone was light, but the edge was there. The other nurse smiled a quick guilty flicker, then grabbed a cookie anyway. Claire folded her hands around a paper cup from the stack near the coffee pot, pretending she did not notice the way Jessie's gaze swept over her jacket, her scuffed shoes, the stray threads on her scrub top. "As long as they are sweet, it is enough for me," Claire said. She said it with a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes, like she had practiced the line long ago and it had worn smooth from use. Jessie's own smile twitched just a little, as if the response had not landed where she expected. The moment stretched in the fluorescent hum. The other nurse broke it by taking a bite. "They are good," she said, around a mouthful more surprised than polite. Jessie chewed hers, then shrugged. "Not bad dollar store," she said. "You could almost sell these." Claire poured herself coffee, the smell rising bitter and burnt. She added a little powdered creamer, watching it swirl into a pale cloud. Outside the narrow break room window, snow swept past in dense streaks. The glass had fogged at the corners. Somewhere above the storm, a faint mechanical thrum moved across the sky so low that it barely disturbed the room. The clock on the wall clicked softly to 7 hijau. Claire took one sip of coffee, bent to tighten the laces of her worn sneakers, and straightened up. Her badge flipped on its retractable clip, catching the light for a second. Name, title, and the photograph of a woman who looked a little less tired than the one standing there now. "Time to go," she said. She left the tin on the table. Jessie watched it, then watched the space Claire had occupied a moment before. The door swung shut behind her with a squeak of old hinges, and the thin walls of the break room did little to muffle the distant sounds of the emergency department waking up for another night. Claire left the break room and stepped into the corridor. The quiet hum of the vending machine faded behind her, replaced by monitor beeps, low voices, and the faint cry of a child. The emergency department was awake. She pushed through the double doors into the ER. Bright light hit her eyes. Disinfectant and coffee hung in the air. Garland drooped over the nurse's station paper snowflakes taped along the counter. A plastic Santa leaned against a computer, its painted grin chipped. Claire set her coffee on a clear corner of the desk and logged in. Names scrolled down the screen in neat lines. Fever, ankle pain, chest, tightness, possible, flu. Head nurse Carla Stevens looked up from a pile of charts. Monroe good, Carla said. We are already backed up. Trauma 3 is standing by. Waiting room is a mess. Where do you need me? Claire asked. Fast track, and keep an eye on bed 6. Monitor keeps dropping out. Tech says the unit is dying, but we do not have a spare. Claire nodded, pulled on gloves, and headed down the row of curtained bays. Whiteboards clipped outside each bed flashed diagnoses in marker abdominal pain fall migraine. Bed 6 waited with its curtain half open. Inside, a man in his 50s leaned back against his pillow, eyes fixed on the monitor. The green line stuttered across the screen, freezing for half a second before leaping forward again. The sound followed, catching and restarting. That cannot be good, he said. Feels like I'm watching myself flatline. Claire took his wrist. The pulse beat steady under her fingers. Your heart is fine, she said. The monitor is the one complaining. As she spoke, the tone went flat for a long second, then snapped back into regular beeps. The man's shoulders rose and fell with a sharp breath. Claire knelt beside the stand and followed the cable from the unit to the wall. Near the base where the cord bent, the plastic looked a shade lighter. She pressed it gently. The line on the screen froze again. She let go. It jumped back into motion. There it is, she said quietly. She unplugged the cord, straightened the bend, so the strain moved higher, and taped it along the stand. When she plugged it in again, the signal held. The green peaks marched across the screen in even rhythm. Still very much alive, she said. You are stuck with us a while longer. The man let out a weak laugh. Guess my ex was wrong, he said. She said nothing could fix me. Claire checked his vitals once more, noted the readings on the chart, and stepped back into the hall. At the nurse's station, the equipment technician pushed a cart past cables coiled on top. Monitor in 6 has a bad spot in the cord, Claire told him. I taped it for tonight. It needs a new lead. The tech sighed. Of course it does, he said. They buy the cheapest cables and then ask why I'm always here. He wheeled his cart toward bed 6. The man inside smiled with relief when he saw him. Glad you showed up, the patient said. Thing was flatlining and then just fixed itself. Loose connection, the tech said, seeing the tape. Good thing I came by. Claire turned toward Fast Track. The small corner of the ER held 3 chairs and 2 stretchers. Holiday music played low from a radio near the sink. She cleaned a shallow cut on a stock clerk's forearm where a box cutter had slipped, placed 3 quick stitches, and covered them with a sterile strip. Keep it clean, she said. No heavy lifting with this arm for a couple of days. Tell that to my boss, he muttered, but he smiled. Next was a student who had sliced her palm trying to pry apart frozen burger patties. After that, a boy with a swollen ankle from backyard football. Claire rapped, stitched, splinted. Her hands moved in a steady rhythm. Her voice stayed even questions, short and practical. People relaxed under that kind of calm. Between patients, she wiped down her tray and glanced toward the main stretch of the ER. Through the glass doors, she could see the waiting room crowded with coats and bowed heads under the harsh ceiling lights. The overhead speaker crackled. Trauma team to Bay 3. The words cut through the hum. A crash cart rattled away from the wall. A resident grabbed gloves and disappeared down the hall. The doors from the ambulance bay swung open, and a brief gust of cold air swept in. Carla appeared beside her. They are short in 3, she said. Go. Claire stripped off her gloves, took a new pair from the box, and walked toward the bright doorway of Bay 3. Inside, the light felt almost harsh. A man in his 30s lay on the tablecloths cut away. Blood covered his chest and pooled along his side. A paramedic spoke quickly, while Dr. Ethan Cole pressed gauze into a wound in the man's abdomen. Single vehicle rollover, the paramedic said. Driver only, unrestrained. In and out of consciousness, on scene. Pressure is dropping, a nurse called from the head of the bed. The monitor numbers slid downward. I do not see the source, Cole said. Suction. The air tasted of iron and antiseptic. Gloves snapped, instruments clinked, the suction whined. Claire took the scissors offered to her and cut away the last strip of fabric sticking to the man's shoulder. She scanned what she could see. Bruises along his ribs, a shallow cut at his collarbone. None of it accounted for the blood on the sheets. She looked at his face. Under the light, his skin had the flat color of wax. His head rested in a cervical collar, tilted slightly to one side. Dark hair clung in wet strands. Claire moved to the head of the bed. Hold him steady, she told the nurse there. She slid her hand under the back of his skull. Her fingers pushed through damp hair and brushed a line of warmth just below the ridge of bone. She shifted his head a fraction toward the light. A narrow cut at the base of the scalp came into view, hidden where hair met skin. Blood seeped from it in a thin, steady line. Occipital laceration, she said, bleeding here. She pressed 2 fingers firmly over the cut. Beneath her hand, she felt bone, then the give of tissue. The flow slowed against the pressure. On the monitor, the numbers inched upward by a small but real margin. Cole's gaze followed hers. Good, he said. His voice rose for the rest of the room. Hidden occipital bleed now controlled. Keep going. Orders moved around them. Fluids hung. A scan was requested. Someone switched out a full suction canister. Claire kept her hand on the wound until another nurse stepped in with fresh gauze. I have it, the nurse said. Claire eased her fingers away. Her palm tingled as the pressure left. Blood had dried in a thin line along the cuff of her glove. Cole patted her arm once. Nice catch, he said. Team effort. He was already talking to the resident about imaging before the words finished leaving his mouth. Claire dropped her gloves into the red bin and stepped back into the corridor. The hallway seemed dimmer after the white light of the trauma bay. She flexed her fingers, once shook out the stiffness, picked up her chart, and walked back toward Fast Track, the layered noise of the ER closing in around her again. By 10 o'clock, the board had filled and emptied twice. Claire moved from room to room until names and faces blurred at the edges. Sprains, cuts, burns, fevers. She cleaned, wrapped, and reassured her hands steady, even as her shoulders ached and the skin under her gloves felt raw. Holiday music leaked in from the waiting room, bright jingles riding on top of flat monitor tones. The clock above the nurse's station slid from one red digit to the next. Between patients, she stood at the computer long enough to finish a note. Her phone buzzed once against her hip. She checked the screen. A notification from Greenview Care Center waited there. Medication update for Jackson Earl. She opened it. The message was short. Please be advised that Mr. Jackson has refused his evening medication twice this week. We recommend a family visit to encourage compliance. Current balance overdue. Please see attached statement. The word overdue sat in its own thin bar of gray. Her thumb hovered above the attachment icon, then moved away. She locked the screen and slipped the phone back into her pocket. For a moment, the ER noise receded. In its place came the memory of a quieter corridor, a different set of fluorescent lights. Earlier that afternoon, before the sky turned heavy, she had stopped at Greenview on her way in. The care center sat on a small hill beside a row of sagging houses. A faded sign at the curb read, Greenview Care Center. Only some of the colored bulbs around the doorway still worked. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling. Someone had taped a construction paper wreath over a clock. The woman at the front desk looked up. Afternoon, Claire, she said. He is in his room. Claire signed the visitor's log. Most of the dates next to Earl Jackson's name were in her own tight handwriting. The hallway to his room was long and bright. A cart rattled past with dinner trays. In one room, a television blared a game show over the sound of snoring. In another, someone hummed under their breath. Earl's door was open a few inches. Mr. Jackson, Claire said, knocking once before she stepped in. He lay propped on his pillows, gray hair in thin tufts, a plaid blanket pulled to his chest. The television on the dresser played a news channel at low volume. On the screen, men in heavy gear moved through snow toward waiting aircraft. A line of text crawled along the bottom. Earl turned his head. His eyes were cloudy for a moment, then sharpened. There she is, he said, my favorite doc. I am not a doctor, Claire said. How are you today? Still creaking, he said, but the wheels turn. She stepped closer and checked the oxygen line at his nose, the clip on his finger. His hand trembled a little when she touched it. Have you eaten? She asked. He nodded toward the tray on the bedside table. Soup, mostly gone, bread untouched. On a napkin beside the tray sat one of her cookies from earlier in the week. Saving that, he said, best thing in the building. She picked it up, broke off a piece, and handed it to him. He took it carefully and chewed lids, dropping halfway over his eyes. On the television, the headline bar shifted. Special Operations Training Incident, multiple casualties, psychological strain cited. Claire reached for the remote and turned the volume down until the anchor's voice disappeared. Helicopter blades spun across the screen in silence. That noise again, Earl muttered. War looks cleaner when it fits in a box. He studied her face. You get that far look, he said. Saw it on boys waiting for the next round to land. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a paperback with its cover curling. I brought the book, she said. Another chapter. He gave a faint grin. Better than the news, he said. Go ahead. She found the folded page and began to read. The story was about a tired detective in a tired city. The words were ordinary, but her voice was steady and calm. Earl listened with his eyes half closed. Outside his window, pale light slid slowly across the parking lot. Inside, the only other sound was the soft hiss of the vent. When she paused, her throat dry, she set the book down for a moment. A folded sheet under the paper cup on the nightstand caught her eye. The Greenview logo sat in the corner, account statement. Earl followed her gaze. They gave you that again, he asked. They send it every month, she said. She unfolded it and scanned the lines. Room, medications, therapy, total due, previous balance. Looks heavy, he said. It is just paper, she replied. She folded the statement along its worn crease and slid it back under the cup. At the front desk earlier, the receptionist had printed a fresh copy while they spoke in low voices. "We can talk about a plan," the woman had said. "We know you come a lot." Claire had signed where she was shown and tucked the paper into her bag. Now she picked up the book again. "One more," she said, "if you stay awake." "I am listening," Earl said. She read until his answers thinned to murmurs. When she stopped, his breathing had settled into an easier rhythm. His eyes were closed. His hand rested on top of the blanket, fingers curling and uncurling with each slow breath. "I have to go," she said softly. "I am due at the hospital." "You go patch them up," he murmured. "I will hold down this bed." She tightened the blanket around his shoulders and set the book within reach. "Try to take your meds tonight," she said. "They emailed me about you." "For you, maybe," he said. "For them, we will see." She touched the back of his hand once. His skin was warm and thin under her fingers. Then she left his room, walked the bright hallway back to the front, and stopped at the desk long enough to swipe her card and sign another line that did not make the total any smaller. Outside, the air had been cold enough to sting her lungs. The first flakes of snow had started to fall as she crossed the parking lot toward her car. She pulled her jacket close and curled her fingers into her sleeves to keep the wind off the cracked seams of her gloves. The memory loosened as the ER sounds came back into focus. A call bell chimed. Someone laughed once quickly. Claire pushed away from the wall. Her break was gone. She took a fresh pair of gloves from the dispenser by the supply cart, snapped them on, and turned toward the nurse's station just as two new names appeared on the board, outlined in yellow. The two new names on the board blinked once and settled into place. One stomach pain, one headache for 3 days, both marked non-urgent. Claire exhaled and rolled her shoulders back. Muscle heat pulsed under the collar of her scrub top. Her coffee from earlier sat forgotten at the edge of the desk, a thin skin forming on top. Head nurse Carla walked past with a stack of charts tucked against her side. "Monroe, take 10, Carla said. "You have been running since you clocked in." "I am fine," Claire said. "I did not ask," Carla replied. "Break room, now. If something explodes, I will find you." Claire almost smiled. Almost. She peeled off her gloves and tossed them into the bin, washed her hands until the sting along her knuckles eased, then dried them and pushed through the break room door. The room was quieter now. The television in the corner had been switched to a holiday movie. The sound was off. A couple on the screen sat beside a decorated tree, mouths moving in a conversation no one could hear. The box of pizza Jessie had ordered earlier lay open on the table, only a cold crust left inside. The Christmas tin sat where Claire had left it, its lid askew. Half the cookies were gone. Crumbs dotted the table like small stains of cinnamon and sugar. Jessie was not there. Neither was anyone else. Claire took the lid from the table, brushed off a few crumbs, and set it back on the tin. Her fingers traced the faded snowflake pattern where the paint had worn thin. Her 10 minutes were her own to spend. She did not sit. Instead, she turned and stepped into the small hallway that led from the break room to the locker room. The light there was a little dimmer, the tiles a little more scuffed. The hum of the building changed pitch deeper and more constant. The locker room door opened with a push and a soft scrape. Metal lined both walls, tall lockers painted a tired gray. A bench ran down the middle, its wooden slats polished by years of use. Claire's locker was near the end. Number 27. The numbers had peeled from most doors, but she knew the small patch of tape she had placed near the top corner years ago. She spun the combination without looking and opened the door. Inside the space was neat. A spare scrub top folded on the shelf, an extra pair of socks tucked into one corner, a travel bottle of lotion that smelled faintly of hospital soap and something floral. A thin book, its spine cracked. On the top shelf, pushed back into the shadows, sat the tin. She reached up and slid it forward. This one was not the cookie tin from the break room. It was older edges, rusted in spots, the picture on the lid almost gone. A faint outline of holly leaves, and a bow remained if she looked closely. Her hands changed when she held this tin. The small lines along her fingers seemed to deepen. The space between her brows tightened. She set the tin on the bench and sat in front of it. The room felt suddenly smaller. She could hear the faint drip of a faucet someone had not quite turned off. She opened the lid. Inside lay the same few items she kept there every shift. A strip of white cloth folded in a narrow, precise rectangle. A small patch of gauze, slightly discolored at one corner from heat. And a plastic card cut cleanly in half. She picked up the card. The laminate had a cloudy film from age, but the print was still clear along one edge. A photograph occupied one corner, the kind taken quickly against a blank background. The woman in the picture stared straight at the camera, hair pulled back tight, eyes harder and less tired. Under the photo, a name in block letters, Monroe Claire A. Below that, in smaller type, the words that did not belong to a hospital badge. Unit Medex Task Force 7. Call sign a Nightingale, Sep 3. The cut ran straight down through the center, separating the words from the barcode at the bottom, the strip that had once opened, secure doors. The other half of the card was gone. She balanced the piece on 2 fingers. The plastic was slick and cold. There had been a time when this card had hung from her neck on a sturdy cord, swinging against armor plates and webbing. It used to slap softly against her chest when she ran. It used to mean she belonged to something. Now it sat in a tin in a locker room, under fluorescent lights, far from sand and fire, in the bitter taste of dust. She set the card down. Her hand went to the back of her neck, fingers pushing her hair aside. The scar was where it always had been, a line of raised skin, just below the hairline, about the length of her thumb. It had healed unevenly. Whoever had stitched it had been in a hurry. Her fingertips traced the shape of it. The skin around it prickled under her touch, as if the nerves there remembered more than the rest of her did. The locker room smell faded. For a moment she heard something else. Rotor wash thudding against a torn landscape. Radios crackling in short bursts. Someone shouting coordinates over a roar that ate the ends of the words. Heat pressed against her face, even though the air had been cold enough to burn in her lungs. Smoke stung her eyes. Her boots slid in mud and something else that had not been just mud. Hands reached for her, pulled at her sleeves. Doc, over here. Medic, he is still breathing. Her own voice raw from yelling, counting under her breath as she compressed a chest as she held a bandage over a wound that spurted through her fingers. Stay with me. Stay right here. The memory snapped like a rubber band let go. The humming fluorescent lights rushed back in. The thin bench under her felt real again. Claire dropped her hand to her lap and pressed her fingers into her knees until the tremor stopped. Her phone was still in her pocket. She pulled it out and unlocked the screen. Her wallpaper was not a photo. It was a text message. The message sat in the center of the screen as if it had arrived seconds ago, even though the timestamp under it told a different story. From Ops Command. Operation Iron Mercy failed. Only 1 medic survived. Date December 24th, 5 years earlier. She had taken a screenshot the night it came before they could revoke it or wipe it. It had been a cold, small proof that she had not dreamed the days before it. She looked at the words without really reading them. The phrase had carved itself into the inside of her skull long ago. Only 1 medic survived. The first time she saw it, she had thought it felt like a sentence, not a report. The second time, it had become a weight. Now it was background noise on her lock screen, a flicker she saw every time she checked the time. She locked the phone and slipped it back into her pocket. On the shelf inside her locker, her hospital badge hung from its retractable reel. She touched it briefly, feeling the ridges of the stamped logo. 2 worlds on different pieces of plastic. Only one of them worked on the doors in this building. There had been a ceremony after Iron Mercy, or so she had been told. Flags folded, speeches read, names spoken aloud in steady lines. Her name had been among them. Killed in action. The words had never quite landed. She was here. Working nights, changing dressings, handing out paper cups of pills, paying room and board for a man who still cracked jokes between breaths of oxygen. If she was dead on paper, she had decided she might as well use what was left of her in places that did not ask too many questions. She closed the tin, the soft clack of metal on metal, small but final. She slid it back onto the shelf behind the folded scrub top where it would wait until the next time she needed to remind herself why her coat was thin and her bank account empty. When she stood, her knees complained. She stretched her back until the joints loosened, then shut the locker door. The latch clicked. In the mirror above the sink, a woman in pale blue scrubs looked back at her. The scar was hidden again under hair. The name on her badge read, Claire Monroe, RN, Emergency Department. She met her own eyes, held the gaze for a heartbeat, then looked away and turned off the light. Out in the hallway, the building hum was louder. A cart rattled somewhere down the corridor. She could hear the faint buzz of the television in the break room as she passed the movie, replaced by the muted glow of a local news broadcast. Through the door's small window, she caught a glimpse of the screen. For a second, she saw footage of a white landscape military vehicles crawling across it like dark insects, men in heavy parkas moving through deep snow. A headline bar in red ran beneath. The sound was off. The image vanished as the channel cut to a commercial, and the door swung shut as she walked by. Claire pushed back through the double doors into the ER. The board weighted its lines of text, shifting as new patients arrived. The overhead lights pressed down bright and even. She pulled on fresh gloves and picked up the next chart. For a while, the hours folded into each other. Patients came and went, woven into the steady hum of the department. The storm outside thickened. Each time the automatic doors at the ambulance bay opened, a slice of freezing air knifed in sharper than the one before. Around midnight, the rush eased. Fewer cars ventured through the snow. The waiting room thinned. Claire finished bandaging a teenager's knuckles and watched him shove his hands into his hoodie pocket, mutter a thanks, and shuffle after his mother. When the curtain dropped back into place, she peeled off her gloves and stepped toward the nurse's station. The television mounted in the corner of the waiting room had been left on the local news. The volume was low sound, just a whisper under the beeps and voices. The image caught her eye through the glass. Not a cooking segment, not a smiling anchor. Grainy footage of dark shapes moving through white. Military trucks rolled along a highway half buried in snow. Headlights made tunnels in the storm. A helicopter hovered in the distance, rotors churning a blur of whiteness around it. The crawl at the bottom flashed in red. Military convoy rerouted through western Pennsylvania. Officials declined to comment. Someone in the waiting room asked the receptionist if the roads were about to close. A child cried. The receptionist reached for the volume, then thought better of it and left the sound where it was. Claire turned back to the station. Her cup of coffee had gone completely cold. She took a sip anyway, then set it aside. Jessie appeared at her elbow, rubbing the back of her neck. You see that Jessie tipped her chin toward the television. Probably some prisoner transport, or they lost Santa. Her attempt at humor fell flat. Dark circles had formed under her eyes. Glitter on her nails caught the light from the monitor. Highway looks bad, Claire said. Maybe they're just avoiding the mountain passes. Jessie snorted softly. If they shut the roads, I am staying in Supply Closet 3 and starting a new life, she said. Paging Nurse Park forever. Head nurse Carla slapped a chart down on the counter. Park enough, Carla said. If the military wants to land in our parking lot, that is city business. We have enough going on in here. Claire, room 12. Ankle injury, male 20s. Jessie rolled her eyes and drifted back toward another row of curtains. Claire picked up the chart for room 12. Briggs Noah, 23. Twisted ankle slip on ice. Possible sprain. Rule out fracture. She pushed open the curtain. The young man on the stretcher wore jeans rolled up to his calf. His boot lay on the floor beside the bed. His ankle had swollen above his sock. A dull red line ringed his leg where the boot had been. A green duffel sat on the chair, its straps frayed in familiar spots. The dog tags at his neck glinted when he turned his head. Mr. Briggs, Claire said. He looked up the movement careful. Yes, ma'am, he said. The accent in the two words was soft, pulled from somewhere further south. Claire. Monroe, she said. I am one of the nurses. How did this happen? Stepped off a bus onto a patch of ice, he said. Came in a little hotter than the curb could handle. He tried to smile and failed when his face tightened with a twinge from his ankle. Any other injuries, she asked, head, neck, back? Just my pride, he said. You would think I would be better on my feet. His jacket lay folded beside him on the stretcher rail. On the sleeve, a small black and gold patch showed an eagle globe and anchor. You are active duty, she said. Yes, ma'am. Marines, he said. On leave. Or I was until I met that sidewalk. She bent to examine his ankle fingers, pressing along the swelling, checking for deformity and tenderness. Pain here, she asked. He hissed through his teeth when she reached the outer bone. All right, she said. Probably a sprain, but we will get an x-ray to be sure. Any numbness in your toes? Feels weird, but I can move them, he said. He wiggled his toes to prove it. She wrapped his ankle in a temporary bandage and made a note to request imaging. Her hands moved efficiently. He watched her face more than he watched what she did. You work every holiday, he asked. Most of them, she said. Rough, he said. Back home, my mom still thinks I get a Christmas tree and a big dinner on base. He laughed under his breath. Maybe next year, Claire said. She finished securing the wrap and covered his foot with the thin blanket. Somebody will come take you for x-rays, she said. Try not to go anywhere on it. Yes, ma'am, he said. He gave a small mock salute that made the dog tags bounce. She left the room with his chart and added x-ray in careful letters on the order sheet. At the nurse's station, Mitch, the security guard, leaned on the high counter, his radio crackling at his shoulder. He had turned the small television behind the desk toward himself and raised the volume a notch. Claire heard the tail end of a report as she approached. Aircraft spotted circling near several regional medical centers, including facilities in Allegheny County, the reporter said. Military spokespeople have not yet confirmed the purpose of these movements. The footage changed to show a blurry shot of a helicopter passing in front of a moon bright behind thin clouds. Mitch shook his head. You see this, he said, as Claire came closer. They are flying over hospitals now, on Christmas. Place gives me the creeps on a normal Tuesday. Tonight it feels like the opening scene of something. Maybe they are just running drills, Carla said, shuffling charts. We are not that interesting. Drills do not happen in a blizzard, Mitch said. Trust me. His radio crackled again. A voice from the main entrance called his name. He pressed the button, answered, then straightened. Got to check the front, he said. If I'm not back and the world ends, you can have my chair. He disappeared through the main doors, the keys at his belt, jingling in rhythm with his steps. Claire filed Noah's chart and moved toward the medication cart. Her fingers brushed the locked drawers in a familiar pattern as she passed. The ER doors to the main lobby slid open with a soft hiss. A gust of colder air rolled in. It carried with it the smell of snow and something else, a faint trace of exhaust and wet wool. The man who walked in did not look like a patient. He wore dark jeans and a heavy black coat zipped up to his throat, bare head, dusted with melting flakes. His hair cropped close at the sides lay flat from a hat he had recently removed. His posture was straight shoulders, squared without effort. His eyes moved in a slow sweep of the room, not lingering on any one person, yet missing little. He paused near the security desk, found it empty, and turned his attention to the nearest person in a hospital badge. "Excuse me," he said. Carla looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked. He pulled a leather wallet from his coat pocket and flipped it open. She caught the flash of a small photo and emblem, a name she did not say aloud. "Colonel Daniel Varga," he said. "United States Army. I'm looking for someone who works here." His voice carried the smooth edges of someone used to being listened to. Not loud, but settled. Carla's expression shifted by degrees from annoyance to professional alertness. "We have a lot of staff," she said. "You need a doctor." "Not exactly," he said. He reached into another pocket and took out a laminated photograph. It had the square format of an ID picture taped at the corners to a blank card. He laid it on the desk. The woman in the photo wore a uniform. Her hair was pulled back tight, no loose strands. The background was plain, the lighting flat. Her eyes stared straight into the camera, unblinking. The jawline was familiar, even under the harder set of muscle. Claire had been turning toward the station when she saw the photo hit the desk. For a fraction of a second, two images overlapped in her mind. The younger version on the laminate, the older one she saw in the mirror. Her feet kept moving, but her angle shifted. Instead of approaching the front of the desk, she veered sideways behind a supply cart and stepped into the narrow space between two curtains. The motion was smooth, too practiced to be chance. From that small L-shaped gap, she could still see through the narrow opening the edge of the photograph, and Varga's hand resting beside it. "I need to know if this woman works at St. Augustine," he said. "Or if she has in the last several years." Carla glanced down, then up at him. "Looks like half my night shift," she said, tired and annoyed. She squinted, leaned closer, then shook her head. "I do not recognize her," she said. "Could be anyone. We turn over a lot of staff." "And security?" he asked. "Maybe your guard would have seen her." "Mitch covers the desk," she said. "He is on a call. You can wait or you can talk to administration during business hours." Varga's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His gaze left Carla's face and swept the room again. Claire flattened her back against the wall between the two beds as his eyes passed over the area where she stood. The patient in the next bay snored softly. An IV pump clicked over to its next cycle. Varga's attention settled on the ER for another long beat. Then he picked up the photo and slid it back into his pocket. "Thank you," he said. He stepped away from the desk. As he walked toward the main entrance, he took out his phone. The glow from the screen lit the lower half of his face. He spoke quietly as the doors opened for him, his words lost in the rush of cold air that followed him out. The doors closed. The ER swallowed the chill and dampened it with the smells of antiseptic and coffee. Claire exhaled slowly through her nose. Her hands had started to sweat inside her gloves. She stripped them off and rubbed her palms against the sides of her scrub top until the clamminess faded. Carla shook her head and turned back to the computer. "Middle of a snowstorm, and now we are a hotel for the Army," she muttered. "Maybe they will fix the parking lot potholes while they are here." Claire stepped out from the space between the curtains. Her face had settled back into its usual calm, but a faint stiffness clung to the corners of her mouth. She reached for a fresh pair of gloves. On the television in the waiting room, the news had moved on to another story, but the image of the convoy lingered like an afterimage at the edge of her thoughts as she pulled the latex over her fingers and went to see the next patient. The board filled again as the night wore on. Flu cases began to cluster in one corner, little stars beside their names to mark potential admissions. A man with chest tightness was taken to a monitored bed. A woman with a migraine sat with her head in her hands under dimmed lights. The storm outside pressed against the windows. Wind drove snow in thick sheets across the glass. The world beyond the parking lot lights blurred into one deep gray. By 2 a.m, the rhythm of the ER had settled into a slower, heavier beat. Conversations dropped to murmurs. Fatigue softened the edges of voices. Claire finished hanging a new bag of fluids and noted the time on the chart. Her fingers ached from the repeated friction of gloves, sanitizer, and tape. When she flexed her hands, the skin between her knuckles felt tight. "Go check on 12 again when you get a chance," Carla called from the desk. "X-ray is done. Room 12. She nodded. Noah Briggs sat propped up slightly higher than before. His boot was still off. A white brace hugged his ankle clean and structured compared to the earlier wrap. The shadows under his eyes had grown, but his posture remained straight. "How did the picture look?" Claire asked. "No breaks," he said. Just a very angry ankle. They said crutches and regret for a week. That sounds about right, she said. Pain level? 3, when I do not move it, he said. 7, when I fake being fine. She smiled slightly and checked the chart clipped to the end of the bed. We will get you something for the pain, she said. Anyone coming to pick you up? My uncle was, but the roads are a mess, he said. He is stuck on the other side of town. They might let me sleep in a chair out there until morning. You are safer here than on the road tonight, she said. We will see what Carla decides. He watched her face for a moment, then glanced at the brace. You rap fast, he said. We had a corpseman in my unit who was good like that. You blink and he had you patched up before you finished complaining. Good hands are useful, she said. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. So that army guy earlier, he said. He was not exactly subtle. She stilled for a fraction of a second. Only her eyes moved, flicking to his. You saw him, she asked. Saw him. Saw the picture, Noah said. Bad angles on the TV, great angles from this bed. He tapped his temple lightly. I noticed, she said. Looked a lot like you, he added. Lots of people look alike in fluorescent light, Claire said. His gaze dipped to her badge, then rose again. I also saw a certain kind of haircut, he said. And something in the eyes. Same thing I see in my own when I forget to look away from the bathroom mirror. Her shoulders did not move, but the space between them and her ears seemed to tighten. X-ray shows a sprain, she said. Once the medication hits, the pain will ease up. He let the topic hang for a moment, then smiled without humor. You ever serve, he asked. Before this, her throat worked around a small swallow. I work here, she said. He reached for his duffel bag on the chair, sliding it closer. As he tugged at the strap, the bag caught at the edge of the stretcher and tipped. The zipper, already strained, slid half open. A rolled pair of socks and a small plastic case spilled out. Something else moved under the fabric. A hard object slid along the blanket toward the edge. It bumped against Claire's hip and came to rest near her hand. She looked down. It was a metal tin smaller than her cookie box, the kind used for breath mints. The top had been scratched, the logo worn almost flat. On reflex, she scooped it up before it dropped and saw for an instant its open edge. Inside, taped to the underside of the lid, she glimpsed a narrow strip of laminated plastic. The color and font were painfully familiar. A coded prefix sat above a barcode pattern, numbers beginning with a sequence she knew better than she knew the phone number to her own apartment. Medex 7. Her hand snapped the lid shut without conscious thought. Metal clicked against metal. Noah's eyes widened. You know what that is, he said. He had seen her reaction. For someone trained to observe, that was enough. She placed the tin back on the bed beside his duffel, more carefully than strictly necessary. You should keep your things zipped, she said. Hospitals eat anything that falls on the floor. He did not look away. That is Medex issue, he said quietly. Special ID format. I have only ever seen those on slides and briefings. Black file stuff. Be careful what stories you repeat, she said. People will think you watch too many movies. The air between them shifted. The usual distance she kept from patients, gentle and professional, now felt like a wall. I was in a briefing last year, Noah said. They used an old photo, talked about a mission called Iron Mercy, said it was wiped off the record, no survivors. But the slide on that ID format had the same prefix, same unit name. His voice dropped another notch. They said only one medic went in with them. Codename Nightingale 3. Claire's grip on the chart tightened until the edges dug into her palm. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Private Briggs, she said. You were here for a sprained ankle. Yes, ma'am, he said. And I am also someone who knows that a normal ER nurse does not know what Medex even is. Her mouth was very still when she spoke again. You did not see that card, she said. You did not see anything. The tone was low without bite, but it held a weight that did not belong to hospital halls. It carried an echo of shouted orders and engines of moments when there was no room for argument. For the first time since she entered the room, Noah's posture shifted from relaxed compliance to something more formal. He straightened as much as the bed allowed. His hand brushed his dog tags. Yes, ma'am, he said. He held her gaze, searching it, then nodded once. I did not see anything, he repeated. She watched him for another breath, then she let the chart drop back to her side. You will have something for the pain soon, she said. If you get dizzy or feel worse, press the call button. Yes, ma'am, he said again. She stepped out of the room and pulled the curtain mostly closed. In the hallway, Jessie was leaning against a supply cabinet, sipping from a disposable cup. She had arrived just in time to see the tin in Claire's hand and to hear the muffled word, Med-X. Jessie's brows rose. New boyfriend in 12, she asked, looked intense. Just a patient, Claire said. Jessie tipped her head toward the curtain. He was talking about some secret whatever Jessie said. Iron something, med what? You planning to start a side gig as a spy? Her tone was light, but a glimmer of curiosity sat sharp behind it. People talk when they are nervous, Claire said. He watched the news on the way in. Convoys, helicopters, it gets into their heads. Jessie smirked. I heard him say, "You knew what that card was," she said. "You have some mysterious past I should be worried about." "Everyone has a past," Claire said. "Yours includes 3 Christmas shifts traded away in 1 week." Jessie laughed. "Guilty," she said. "Still, if you secretly train special forces, you should tell me. I would stop calling you Dollar Store." She did not wait for an answer. Someone at the station called her name, and she pushed off the cabinet, tossing her empty cup into the trash as she went. Claire walked back toward the nurse's station. Carla was on the phone with someone from upstairs, voice edged with the patience reserved for administrators who did not work nights. "Yes, we know the roads are bad," Carla said. "We cannot just close the ER." She listened for a moment, jaw tightening, then sighed. "Fine," she said. "I will see who can be released." She hung up and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "City is asking all departments to cut non-essential staff," she said. "They want as few people on the roads tomorrow as possible. They are talking about closing secondary routes until the plows catch up." A murmur moved along the desk. One of the younger nurses let out a soft cheer and then hid it behind her hand. "So who gets to leave?" Jessie asked, reappearing in time to hear the last part. "Anybody who is not critical to keeping this place upright," Carla said. "I will make a list. Volunteers first, if family pressure is involved." Heads turned toward the board, toward the clock, toward thoughts of warm houses and sleeping children. Claire spoke before anyone else. "I can stay," she said, "through the morning if needed." Carla did not look surprised. "You always can," she said, "but I'm not putting you by yourself." She glanced along the line of tired faces and started picking names. One by one, nurses with kids at home or long drives in the dark were told to sign out early. A few protested half-heartedly and then accepted. Others nodded quickly, relief clear in their expressions. Soon the cluster behind the desk thinned, charts were handed off, coats were pulled from hooks, boots thudded against the floor. "Text me if you need extra bodies," one nurse said. The plows actually show another added tugging on gloves. They moved toward the staff exit, bundled against the cold. As they opened the door at the end of the hall, a blast of frigid air rolled in, carrying the smell of snow and distant exhaust. Claire watched them go, then turned back to the room. There were fewer uniforms now, fewer familiar faces. The space felt larger and emptier at once. Carla checked the staffing sheet. "Night squad, such as it is," she said. "Me, Park 1, Tech 1 resident, and whoever the doctors do not manage to sneak out." She drew a line through a name. "We make it work," she said. Claire nodded. Her own jacket hung in the locker room, thin and frayed. Her apartment would be dark. The bed would be cold. There was no one waiting there who would notice if she walked in at dawn or at noon. She pulled on a fresh pair of gloves. The latex snapped softly against her wrists. A gust of wind rattled the glass panes at the end of the hall. Somewhere above, faint but distinct, the thudding beat of helicopter blades passed overhead and faded into the storm. The thudding overhead faded, then returned a minute later, stronger and closer. This time the sound did not pass by. It hovered. Claire paused at the medication cart, one hand on a drawer, and tilted her head. The hum of the building seemed to vibrate in response, a faint tremor running down through ceiling tiles and light fixtures. Jessie glanced up from the nurse's station. "Tell me that is a news chopper," she said. Carla checked the clock on the wall, then looked out toward the double doors that led to the ambulance bay. "At 2:30 in this weather? No," she said. "Keep moving." The overhead lights flickered once. Monitors blinked their screens, going dark for a breath, then coming back as the backup power kicked in. A thin ripple of worry passed through the few awake patients. Someone in the waiting room called out for a nurse. Claire checked the nearest monitor. The numbers reappeared. The green line traced a steady rhythm. "Power is stable," she said to the older man in the bed. "You are fine." He nodded, knuckles white on the blanket. The helicopter's rotor beat deepened. The sound was no longer overhead, but offset like it was sliding down one side of the building. A few loose ceiling tiles rattled faintly in their frames. Mitch's voice crackled over his radio before his body reached the ER. "Carla," he said, pushing through the main doors at a half-jog. "We have got a situation." His cheeks were red from the cold. Snow clung in wet specks to his sleeves. "What kind of situation?" Carla asked. "That kind," he said, jerking his thumb toward the front. He moved to the nurse's station television and turned up the volume. The local news anchor was mid-sentence, but the image behind her showed live footage from a rooftop somewhere in the city. A large helicopter crouched on the concrete, its blades slowing from a blur to visible knives. Figures in dark gear moved around it. "Military aircraft have been seen touching down on several hospital roofs in the region," the anchor said. Officials have not released details, but witnesses report a significant armed presence at multiple facilities. Mitch lowered the volume again and looked at Carla. "That rooftop looks a lot like ours," he said, "and something just landed up there. There are also vehicles pulling up to the gate. The good kind, the expensive kind." Jessie came to stand beside Claire, coffee forgotten in her hand. "You mean they are really coming here?" she asked. "What for? We already have enough drama." Mitch shook his head. Nobody tells the guard until they are already inside, he said. All I know is they are not local cops. The radio at his shoulder crackled again louder this time. Mitch front entrance, a voice barked. Now, you need to see this. He pressed the talk button. On my way, he said. He looked at Carla. Lockdown or no, he asked. You want me to keep them in the lobby? Carla let out a short huff of air. If whoever that is can land a helicopter on my roof in a blizzard, they can walk through my lobby, she said. Just keep civilians calm. Mitch nodded and hurried back toward the main entrance, his boots squeaking on the damp floor. Jessie watched him go, then leaned closer to Claire. Maybe they really are hauling in some high-profile psycho, she whispered. Or maybe it is aliens. Secret lab stuff. Keep your voice down, Claire said. Jessie laughed once quickly. It sounded thin. You are not even curious, Jessie asked. I am busy, Claire said. The helicopter thudded overhead again, closer to a roar now than a distant beat. Somewhere above them, heavy doors must have opened onto the roof. The draft snaked down through vents and seams, carrying a strange mix of smells. Snow, jet fuel, hot metal. A minute later, an engine noise rose from outside. Through the glass panes at the far end of the hall, Claire saw moving lights. Headlamps glowed like low stars beyond the drifting snow. Dark shapes slid in behind them, bulky and purposeful. Tires churned, pushing slush aside in thick arcs. Carla walked to the edge of the corridor and watched the shapes approach the drop-off area. She folded her arms. If they block my ambulance lane, I am charging them for every delay, she said. Jessie moved to stand beside her, eyes wide. Those are not ambulances, Jessie said. Those are the things that bring the people who break the ambulances. The first vehicle halted just short of the main doors. It was too big to be anything civilian. Its sides were smooth, painted a matte color that swallowed the light. The second rolled in behind it, then a third forming a row of dark machines against the snow. Doors opened. Men and women climbed down boots, landing in the slush with solid thuds. They wore helmets and heavy gear bodies outlined in straps and webbing. Weapons hung across their chests, secured but not hidden. They moved with the same speed and precision as a code team, only their patient was somewhere inside the building. Claire watched from the nurse's station doorway as the front doors slid open. The first two soldiers entered at a clipped walk, scanning. Their eyes did what their weapons did not. They swept the lobby, the waiting room, the hall that led into the ER. A third stepped in with a radio pressed to his ear, words short and crisp. Team 1 inside, he said. Clear path to objective. Patients in the waiting room turned in their chairs. A child pointed his mouth open. His mother pulled his arm down quickly. Mitch stood between the lobby and the ER doors, hands up in a placating gesture. This is a hospital, he said. We have policies. One of the soldiers with a headset pointed to his badge. We have orders, he said. No one is in danger if no one gets in our way. He did not raise his voice. People stepped aside anyway. Carla stepped into the opening between the ER and the lobby. Her face had changed from irritation to something colder. You cannot just walk people with guns through my department, she said. You want to take over the parking lot? Fine. In here, I am in charge. The soldier's gaze met hers for a second. Ma'am, we are not here for you or your patients, he said. We are here for one person. We will be quick. He signaled to someone behind him. Another figure followed them in. No helmet, dark coat zipped to the throat. Snow melted in drops along the shoulders. Colonel Daniel Varga. In the ER light, his face looked sharper than it had earlier in the evening. Lines around his eyes cut deeper now that he was no longer trying to blend in. His gaze went immediately past Carla, to the nurse's station, the beds, the staff moving between them. He took 2 steps forward, stopped, and turned in a slow, deliberate circle, taking in every face. Claire stayed where she was, partly behind a computer monitor, a chart in her hand. Her body did not move. Only her eyes tracked his path. Jessie leaned close to her. That is the guy from before, she whispered. The one with the photo. He really did come back with backup. Claire did not answer. Varga scanned the room in sections, sorting uniforms from patients, familiar profiles from strangers. The soldiers spread out behind him, forming a loose line that stopped just short of the treatment area. They did not crowd anyone, but there was no mistaking that they controlled the space they occupied. Mitch hovered near the door, torn between his duty to question visitors and the clear reality that his authority did not rank here. Varga addressed the room without raising his voice. We are looking for a member of your staff, he said. We have reason to believe she is here now. His eyes passed over Jessie, Carla, the techs, the resident, the respiratory therapist, the few remaining nurses. He did not pull out the laminated photo again. He seemed to be matching memory to the real thing. Jessie lifted her chin, defensive humor ready. Is this about some kind of runaway spy, she said? Because the most dangerous thing around here is the coffee machine. A few strained laughs scattered around the room. One of the soldiers almost smiled, then smoothed his expression. Varga's gaze moved over Jessie without pausing. He kept turning. Through it all, the everyday noises of the ER tried to continue. A monitor beeped, a baby fussed behind one curtain. Someone coughed in a dry, repeated pattern. The rhythm had changed, though. Every sound felt layered over the presence of boots and gear, and the strange stillness that comes when people sense something out of their usual map. Varga's circle brought him back to the nurse's station. This time, as his eyes scanned the faces there, his focus narrowed. For a fraction of a second, he stilled. Claire met his gaze from across the desk. He took in the hair that was looser than in the photo he had carried, the lines that had deepened around the eyes, the pale blue scrubs instead of combat uniform. The badge on her chest, the way she did not flinch, even as every other head in the room turned to follow his line of sight. Recognition flickered across his eyes, quick and certain. He straightened, lifted his radio, and spoke into it. "Target confirmed," he said quietly. "Bringing in actual." The words carried farther than he meant them to. Jesse turned to Claire, 100 questions rushing into the space between them, but none of them made it past her lips. Above them on the roof, the helicopter blades began to spin up again. The vibration rolled down through the building like a distant drum. The soldiers shifted as one, opening a clear path from the lobby into the center of the ER. A corridor formed between gear and uniforms, leading straight to where Claire stood. The outer doors slid open once more to admit another figure from the snow. The doors parted on a gust of air that smelled of snow and jet fuel. The man who stepped through was not in combat gear. He wore a dark field coat over a simple uniform, the fabric heavy and precise. Snowflakes melted along the shoulders and dampened the brim of his cap. He took it off as he crossed the threshold, tucking it under his arm. His hair was cut short silver, showing at the temples. His face was lined, not from softness, but from years of squinting into bad weather and worse days. A small bar of ribbons sat above his left pocket, colors muted in the hospital light. He walked past the line of soldiers without glancing at them. They shifted a step to either side, making space without being asked. The lobby noise faded. People in chairs leaned forward. A toddler went quiet mid-fuss. He crossed into the ER proper, as if it were familiar territory. His boots left damp marks on the tile that glistened under the fluorescent lights. His eyes swept the room, once not searching now, but confirming. They settled on Claire. For a second, he simply looked at her. The slight tilt of his head suggested he was comparing this version to one he carried in his memory, adjusting for the years and the scrubs and the thinness that war had not put there. Then he stopped 3 paces from the nurse's station. The soldiers behind him stilled. The room held its breath. He set his cap on the edge of the counter, squared his shoulders, and straightened until his spine looked carved from steel. His right hand rose to his temple, fingers pressed along his brow in a crisp salute. "Nightingale 3, he said. "Ma'am." The words landed in the middle of the ER like something dropped from a great height. Jessie blinked. Her coffee cup slipped in her fingers. A brown arc of liquid splashed onto the floor. Carla stared eyes wide behind her glasses. The resident standing near the crash cart swallowed audibly. Claire did not move for a heartbeat. The last time she had seen that man, his face had been bloodless teeth clenched against pain while she knelt on rough ground. Sand and ice had mixed under her boots. His leg had pulsed red between her hands. General Samuel Reed, then a colonel, now standing solid and whole under hospital lights. Her own shoulders twitched, almost responding to the salute, before her body remembered the badge on her chest and the locker down the hall with a card cut in half. I'm not in service anymore, sir," she said. Her voice came out steady. It had less volume than his, but each word reached the back of the room. Reed held the salute for another second, then lowered his hand slowly, as if reshelving something he did not intend to put away for long. He turned his head, not his body, to take in the faces around them. "Do you people know," he asked, "who you have been working beside?" The question was quiet. The room heard it anyway. No one answered. A suction machine hummed faintly in the next bay. He turned back to Claire, then shifted his stance so that he faced the room with her at his side. It was a small adjustment, but it placed her in a position that looked very little like just a nurse at a station. "This woman," he said, "is Sergeant Claire Monroe, former medic, Med X Task Force 7. Call sign Nightingale 3. Noah in room 12 could hear the cadence through the half-closed curtain. His hand went instinctively to his dog tags. Reed's gaze found a point on the wall, as if he were watching it transform into something else. 5 years ago, Operation Iron Mercy went sideways in weather worse than this, he said. Intel was wrong. Terrain was wrong. Exit route vanished under us. We were in a valley that turned into a killing floor. The ER dissolved for him just for a moment. Snow not clean white like the flakes on the parking lot, but gray with soot and dust. The strobe of flares. The staccato flash of muzzle fire along a ridgeline that had looked empty on aerial photos. The sharp bite of air knifing into lungs already burning from sprinting under weight. "We lost half the unit in the first 10 minutes, Reed said. The rest of us were scattered, wounded, pinned down." He saw it again. Men dragging each other behind rocks. Shouts for medics that went unanswered. then answered by the wrong kind of silence. His own leg afire at first, then a spreading cold from the inside out. She moved through that valley like she had 3 bodies, he said. If you called for a medic, Nightingale showed up. Claire did not look at him. She stared at a spot on the floor, jaw tight, lashes low. Her hand rested on the counter, fingers pressed so hard into the wood that the knuckles blanched. She found me with 30 seconds of femoral bleed left before I was gone, Reed said. Tourniquet was not enough. She cut a strip from her own uniform, packed the wound-held pressure while dragging me 3/4 of a mile under fire. The words were plain. There was no embroidery on them. That made them land harder. Someone near the back exhaled shakily. She refused extraction twice, Reed went on. She would not get on the bird until every man she could reach was either on it or tagged as beyond saving. He looked at her again. She was the last one on the helicopter, he said, covered in other people's blood, including mine. He let the image sit there. Then he continued. Command decided Iron Mercy could not exist on paper, he said. The mission was scrubbed. Files were sealed. Official reports listed the entire team as killed in action. He paused. His hand brushed the ribbons on his chest, almost like he was counting the ones that owed more to that night than they did to the ink that described them. For the record to make sense, Nightingale 3 had to die too, he said, even though she did not. Carla's hand rose to her mouth. Jessie stared, eyes bright in the harsh light. We lost track of her after she left the debrief site, Reed said. Somewhere between a file being stamped and a signature scrawled, she slipped out of the machine. His tone shifted, a thread of personal frustration threading through the formal cadence. I have been looking for her since, he said. For 5 years. He turned his body now facing Claire fully. You vanished, Sergeant, he said. You let us bury you on paper and walked into a night shift. I chose a night shift, she said. There is enough blood in the daylight. Her voice held more gravel now. It carried a tiredness that did not come from the last 8 hours alone. He nodded once, acknowledging that line without trying to erase it. You chose to heal, he said. You have not stopped. I can see that. His eyes flicked toward the room where patients lay under blankets. She had adjusted IVs, she had started bandages, she had tied. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a thin file. No big red stamps, no bold labels, just a sheaf of papers held together with a black clip. He laid it on the counter between them and opened it with his thumb. Charts, graphs, typed lines with acronyms, handwritten corrections in the margins. Here's the part that makes me set foot in your ER on Christmas. In a snowstorm, he said, we built a new psychological triage system for special operations. High stress, high altitude, high risk. On paper, it is exactly what we need. He tapped one chart where a line dipped sharply at a certain point. In practice, it is breaking people, he said. We are seeing a pattern of collapses, panic responses in the field where there should be focus. Men and women who have passed every screen are suddenly freezing or fracturing when it counts. His finger moved along the line to a handwritten note in the margin. The ink had smeared slightly where it was pressed too hard. The protocol started as your draft, he said. The Nightingale framework. Someone dusted it off, updated the language, and rolled it out, without the one person who knew what it looked like when it failed. Claire's eyes flicked to the page, then away. I wrote that in a tent between rotations for a unit that did not exist half an hour later, she said. I am not sure I trust the person who made those notes, which is why I need the person who survived the fallout, Reed said. I need the medic who watched it breaking in real time, not the version who thought it up for a clean whiteboard. He closed the folder. We are losing operators, he said simply. Not from bullets, from a system that does not understand how their minds crack under the specific load we are putting on them. He looked at her with something that did not quite fit in the tidy categories of rank and chain of command. You are the only one who has seen that crack from the inside and lived long enough to stand in a room like this, he said. I am not here to pull you back into a line of fire. I am here to ask for your eyes and your judgment. The silence in the ER had thickened. Even the machines seemed to have quieted. Jessie swallowed. Dr. Ethan Cole, who had hovered at the edge of the scene, thought of the occipital bleed in Trauma 3 and the way Claire's hand had found it without panic. Noah, listening from his bed, heard the word Nightingale and remembered the worn edge of a tin and the way her voice had dropped when she told him not to see. Carla looked at the staffing sheet in her hand and at the woman she had scheduled for every holiday for the last 3 years, suddenly understanding that she had never once asked what came before the hospital. Claire's fingers closed over the edge of the file. The paper crinkled slightly under her grip. Sir, she said slowly, I have a full board, patients who need me here, people who bleed in smaller ways. Reed nodded. And there are others who bleed in places no one sees, he said. You taught me that in that valley. He did not push the file closer. He did not pull it back. He left it there on the counter between her hand and his, waiting for whichever direction it would move. Claire did not take her hand off the folder. The room watched the small muscles at the corner of her jaw move as she thought. For a moment, the sounds of the ER shrank to a soft blur like water behind glass. When she spoke, she looked at Reed, not at the curious faces around them. "If I read this," she said, "and if I see what is wrong, what happens, then—" Reed held her gaze. "Then you come with us to the training site," he said. "You see the protocol in motion, you tell us where the break is, we change it. You go back to whatever you decide is next. And in the meantime," she said, "you keep running people through a system that collapses them." His mouth tightened. "In the meantime, we slow everything we can," he said. "But I cannot pull the plug on the only framework we have without something better in place. That is the truth." Her fingers pressed deeper into the paper. "You are asking me to help patch the machine that feeds the line," she said. "I spent a long time pulling bodies out of what that line does. I am asking you to stop it from chewing them up in their heads before they ever see a shot fired," he said. "We trained them to endure a certain kind of pressure. Now the pressure has changed. We did not change the scaffolding. That is on me." His voice dropped on the last sentence. "I'm not asking you to sign off on targets," he said. "I am asking you to keep the people who carry out those decisions from shattering." The folder sat between their hands. Claire's thumb stroked the edge once back and forth. She could feel eyes on her from every direction. The staff who had worked beside her for years. The resident who had watched her find a bleed he had missed. The young nurse who had laughed over her cookies. Behind the half-closed curtain of room 12, Noah stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence between their words. Sir Claire said, "At last I will go." Jessie made a small sound in her throat, a sharp intake. But Claire continued. "I will go with one condition." Reed waited. "I do not write anything that increases your body count," she said. "I do not create another Iron Mercy. If what I see cannot be used to keep your people intact, I walk." Reed did not hesitate. "Agreed," he said. He said it like a pledge rather than a concession. She released the folder. Her hand fell to her side. "I have patients to hand over," she said. Carla stepped forward as if someone had called her name. "We can cover," Carla said. "I will reassign." Her voice shook on the first word, then steadied. Reed dipped his head to her in brief thanks, then spoke into his radio. "She is coming," he said. "Prep the bird." The helicopter's low rumble above them shifted, rising in pitch as engines spun toward full. Claire turned away from the station. Her eyes swept the room in a quick inventory. The older man whose monitor she had just checked. The child asleep on his mother's chest. The woman with the migraine now dozing under dimmed lights. "Park," Carla said, recovering some of her usual sharpness. "Take over Monroe's Bay assignments. Cole, you handle her trauma paging. I will float." Jessie nodded, throat working. "Yes," she said. "Of course." Her gaze snapped to Claire. "You are just going to go?" she asked, incredulous and small at the same time. Claire met her eyes. "I'm going to do my job," she said. "Same as always." She did not say which job she meant. As she moved past room 12, the curtain there shifted. "Ma'am," Noah called softly. She paused, then pushed the curtain aside just enough to see him. His face had color again, but there was a strange tightness around his mouth. "Private Briggs," she said. "You should be resting." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I just wanted to say—" He trailed off, searching for a word that fit more than the situation allowed. "You do not have to say anything," she said. He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am," he repeated, "but I wanted to." His hand resting on the blanket began to tremble. Claire watched his face. His pupils had dilated slightly. A fine sheen of sweat had appeared along his brow. The color that had returned to his cheeks was flushing too fast. "How long since you ate?" she asked. He blinked. "I had something at the bus station," he said. "Hours ago, maybe." His fingers clenched in the blanket, then loosened. "You feel lightheaded?" she asked, nausea, ears ringing. His eyes flicked toward the door, toward the sound of the helicopter above them, toward the soldiers in the hall. "Little dizzy," he admitted. "Heart feels like it is trying to leave." She stepped fully into the room, her annoyance with timing pushed aside by habit. She reached for his wrist. His pulse raced beneath her fingers, a quick, fluttering beat. She looked at his hands. The tips of his fingers were pale despite the warm room. A shallow breath caught in his chest. She raised her voice, not loud, but strong and directed. "Dr. Cole," she called toward the station. "I need you in 12. Cole turned and came confusion on his face. "What is it?" he asked. "His ankle is fine." "He is about to drop his pressure," Claire said. "Look at him." Cole stepped to the bedside. Noah tried to sit up and failed, the world tilting. "It is nothing," he said. "Just tired." "Blood pressure cuff," Claire said. "Now, start a bolus." She did not wait for agreement. She rolled the cart closer and snapped the cuff onto Noah's arm, herself, fingers moving with practiced at speed. The pump hissed and hummed. Numbers appeared on the screen, lower than they should have been. "Vasovagal response," she said, triggered by stress and pain. Cole's expression shifted from skepticism to focus. He grabbed a bag of fluids and spiked it, hanging it on the pole with a clatter. Claire raised the head of the bed a little and lifted Noah's legs, resting his heels on a folded blanket. "Breathe," she said to him. "Slow, in and out." He did as she said, pulling air into his lungs in measured draws. The whites of his eyes stopped showing so much. His hands, still pale, clenched less tightly. The steady drip from the fluid bag began. Color crept back into his face by degrees. Cole watched the monitor, then glanced at Claire. "Nice catch," he said. It was the same phrase he had used in Trauma 3, but it sounded different now, stripped of any claim. Claire nodded once. "He is young," she said. "He will bounce back." She touched Noah's shoulder briefly. "You are all right," she said. "You scared yourself." "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice small. As she stepped out of the room, she caught Reed watching from the hall. He said nothing. He did not need to. Carla handed her coat as she passed the station. The fabric felt thinner than she remembered. The sleeves were worn shiny at the cuffs. "You need this," Carla said. Claire took it. "Patients are in good hands," Carla added. She said it like a fact, but her eyes were bright. Jessie stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself. "I am sorry," Jessie blurted. "For the names, for the joke." Claire looked at her. "I heard everyone," she said. "I chose not to answer." Jessie flinched. "I did not know," she said. "You did not ask," Claire replied. There was no venom in it, only truth. She pulled on her coat. Her hands disappeared into the sleeves, thin fingers pressing against thin lining. The zipper stuck, as always, halfway up. Reed noticed, but did not comment. They walked together toward the staff elevator that led to the roof. The soldiers parted for them, creating a clear lane. The ride up was short. The elevator hummed and shook slightly. The floor numbers lit and darkened in quick succession. On the roof, the wind hit them full on. It smelled of cold metal and fuel and the clean, sharp edge of snow. The helicopter sat like a crouched animal, rotors spinning, lights casting a green and white wash over the concrete. Snow swirled in the rotor wash, stinging their faces. Claire squinted, lifting a hand to shield her eyes. Her coat flapped around her thighs. The noise filled her chest. Reed leaned close so she could hear him. "Whatever happens next," he said, "you are not alone in it, not this time." She did not answer. Her hair whipped around her face. The scar at the back of her neck prickled in the cold. A crew chief in a headset waved them forward. She climbed the short metal ladder into the belly of the aircraft, her hand closing on a bar slick with melted snow. Reed followed, taking the seat across from her. The door slid shut. The sound of the rotors muffled but did not disappear. From the small round window near her knee, Claire could see the roof and the edge of the city beyond, outlines softened under layers of white. As the helicopter lifted, the hospital shrank to a block of light in a field of gray. Inside the ER, the silence after the doors closed felt almost as loud as the helicopter had. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the ordinary sounds flowed back, shaken into a new pattern. Jessie stared at the empty space where Claire had been. The words "I did not ask" circled in her head, rubbing blister raw against old habits. The coffee on the floor cooled in a brown ring around her shoes. Dr. Cole looked at his hands, the same hands that had been praised and deferred to, and saw with unwelcome clarity how many times someone else's quiet competence had steadied his work. Carla turned to the board and saw not just names and room numbers, but the traces of what one person had been holding without complaint. By dawn, the first changes began. It was Jessie who pulled down the faded poster that listed vagrants and indigents among patient categories. The corners tore as she tugged. She smoothed a clean sheet of paper over the adhesive and wrote in thick marker, "People first." No labels. She taped it above the nurse's station where every person who picked up a chart would see it. Later, when the initial shock had thinned into a steady ache, a small group of staff found their way to the locker room. They stood for a moment in the doorway, awkward, in a space that usually held only rushed changes and muttered complaints. Jessie opened locker 27 with the combination Carla had supplied. Inside an extra scrub top, a small bottle of lotion, a book. On the hook hung Claire's spare white coat, older than most cuffs. Slightly frayed, a faint stain of coffee near one pocket. Jessie lifted it down. The fabric was lighter than she expected. She ran her hand over the badge clip at the chest, now empty. "We should not just leave it in here," she said. Carla nodded. "There is an old display case in the east hallway," she said. "We have not put anything in it since the Volunteer of the Month program died." They carried the coat there together. The case stood under a flickering light, glass dusty shelves bare. Someone had left a foam snowman in one corner the previous year. It slumped to the side, its paper hat bent. They cleaned the glass with the edge of a scrub top and the sleeve of a sweatshirt. Jessie opened the case and laid the coat inside, arranging the sleeves so they fell natural. On a scrap of paper torn from the corner of a chart, she wrote in careful letters, "The uniform of humility." She taped it crookedly to the inside of the glass. When they stepped back, the coat looked almost like it was still waiting to be worn. Light from a nearby monitor cast a soft green reflection on the glass framing it in an odd, cool halo. Staff passed it on their way to and from the break room. Some paused, some did not. Every person who saw it, though, felt a small shift, a tilt, in how they measured the people beside them. Outside, the storm began to ease. Snow still fell, but the flakes came slower, drifting, instead of slashing past the windows. Inside St. Augustine, the night that had started with laughter over cheap cookies settled into a different kind of quiet. 3 days after the storm, the sky over Pittsburgh cleared to a hard, bright blue. Snow still banked along the curbs and piled on rooftops, but the air had shifted. Plows scraped at the last ridges of ice along the hospital access road. The city felt as if it were shaking off a heavy coat. At St. Augustine, word moved faster than the paging system. "They are coming back," someone said at the nurses' station. Who, another asked. "You know who." By the time the thudding of rotors returned, this time under sunlight instead of darkness, most of the ER staff who were on shift had drifted toward the main corridor. Some stood with charts in hand. Others tucked their pens into their pockets and folded their arms. There were no speeches arranged, no official directive to gather. They came anyway. The helicopter settled on the roof with a familiar tremor. A minute later, the staff elevator hummed. Its doors slid open to reveal General Samuel Reed and Claire Monroe. Reed stepped out first, hat in hand. He wore the same dark coat, now dry and neatly brushed. Claire walked at his shoulder. Her coat looked no thicker than before. Her hair was pulled back in a tighter tie. There were faint shadows under her eyes that had not been there 3 days earlier, but the set of her shoulders was easier, as if a weight she had carried alone had shifted. Carla moved forward as they entered the ER. Behind her, nurses and techs formed an uneven line, not quite a formation, but not casual either. "General," Carla said. "Ma'am," Reed replied, inclining his head. Then he stepped aside, leaving Claire in the center of everyone's view. For a second, no one spoke. The sounds of the department went on, but softer, like someone had closed a door halfway on the usual noise. Jessie was the first to move. She stepped out of the line and straightened. "Welcome back," she said. The words were simple. Her voice made them heavier. Claire's mouth curved. "Good to be back," she said. Her eyes took in the familiar shapes. The nurses' station, the monitors, the chairs in the waiting room, the coffee machine that sputtered in the corner, the same old garland sagging above the desk. It was all the same, and it was not. Reed cleared his throat softly and reached into his coat. "Sergeant Monroe," he said. "On behalf of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I have something for you." He held out a stiff cream-colored folder. The gold crest at the top caught the fluorescent light. Claire took it and opened it. Words marched down the page in formal language. Citations, dates, a line that named her as MedTech Guardian, an honor reserved for medics who had saved more lives in combat than most people ever saw in a lifetime. Her eyes moved over the lines once. Her thumb pressed along the edge of the paper. She closed the folder and held it back out to him. "It is not that I am ungrateful," she said. "I just do not need another title to carry." Reed studied her face, then accepted the folder without argument. "The paper will exist whether you hold it or not," he said. "We can frame it somewhere in a hall full of other paper, or we can let it sit in a drawer. That part is noise." His tone softened. "The part that matters already happened," he said. "You went to that training facility. You saw the cracks. You gave us a way to seal them before they swallowed anyone else." Images flickered briefly behind Claire's eyes. A hangar converted into a simulation space. Young faces under harnesses, eyes wide behind headsets. Treadmills tilted at impossible angles. Screens full of jagged lines charting stress responses. The moment she watched a trainee freeze in a virtual drop and recognized in the timing of his collapse the echo of a flaw she had written years ago. "They built a delay into the relief cycle," she said quietly. "They pushed them past the point where recovery was possible, then wondered why they shattered." Reed nodded. "You saw it in 1 hour," he said. The team working on it had missed it for months. They had never watched someone go over that edge in a real gorge with real fire coming down. He turned slightly, including the others in his words. "She showed us exactly where to move the pressure," he said. "She rewrote the protocol with room for a human mind, not just a perfect soldier on paper." Carla's eyes did not leave Claire's face. Pride and something close to shame coiled together in her chest. Reed reached into his coat again and produced a plain white envelope, thicker than the first. "This is less symbolic," he said. "Back pay and benefits. 5 years of them. Your record has been amended. The government cannot officially keep you dead anymore." The envelope looked almost fragile in his hand. Claire did not reach for it at once. When she did, her fingers brushed his. "It's not about the money," she said. "I know," he replied. "Take it anyway." She weighed it in her palm. The paper felt heavy, but for once in her life, the weight did not sit like a stone in her stomach. A mental picture rose without being invited. Greenview Care Center. A receptionist sliding a statement across the desk. The word "overdue" printed in a neat column. "Yes," she said. "I can use it." Reed seemed to understand exactly where her thoughts had gone. Pay the man's bills, he said. He earned it before either of us did. He hesitated, then added more softly, so did you. The staff shifted. Some looked at the floor, some at Claire, some at the old scuff marks on the tiles that had never meant anything until now. Jessie took a step closer. General, she asked, how did you find her at all, if she was on paper as gone? Reed glanced at Claire as if asking permission. She did not stop him. We stopped looking for a name and started looking for a signature, he said. There are supplies that only one unit ever used. Thermal reactive bandages from an old Med X cache. They were supposed to be destroyed years ago. Most were. He shifted his grip on his folder. We noticed a handful of them kept showing up in supply audits, he said. Signed out from a city hospital that had no reason to stock them. Wrapped around the wounds of veterans who did not rate that kind of detail on anybody's budget. He gave a small, almost private smile. That is what gave you away, Sergeant, he said. You bandage people the way you did in the valley, whether they are special operators or men sleeping under bridges. A faint color touched Claire's face. I did not think anyone was paying attention to how I wrapped IV sites, she said. We were not, he said, until we started following kindness instead of paperwork. The words sat between them for a moment. Finally, he picked his cap up from the counter. This is your place, he said to her. I have taken enough of your time from it. He looked at the staff at the faces that now held more understanding than they had before. Take care of her, he said. We will, Carla answered, and this time there was no hesitation. Reed nodded once, tucked the folder under his arm, and turned to go. The soldiers who had waited near the entrance straightened, then stepped aside, letting him pass out into the lobby. When the doors closed behind him, the ER breathed out as one. Claire stood in the middle of the room, with the envelope in one hand and nothing in the other. The board glowed behind her. The monitors beeped on. Life did not stop to make room for anything, not even this. Carla cleared her throat. Shift is not over, she said. Her voice was dry, but the edge had softened. Monroe, when you are done being famous, we have labs to check. A ripple of quiet laughter broke the tension. Claire smiled, a real one that reached her eyes. Yes, ma'am, she said. She set the envelope gently on the counter and moved toward the nurse's station. There beside the computer where she had logged in 3 nights earlier, someone had cleared a small space. A glass jar held a cluster of white flowers, simple, and a little uneven stems crowded together. Beside it lay a fan of cards. She picked up the first. Thank you for being here when no one looked. The handwriting was shaky, the letters tall and thin. A room number was scrawled at the bottom. She recognized the man from bed 6 who had watched his own monitor as if it were a clock counting down. Another card. You fixed my mom's hand, and you fixed our thinking. The next was on a folded piece of chart paper. Jessie's handwriting leaned hard to the right, ink pressed deep. I called you cheap because I did not see you. I am sorry. I will try to see better. Jessie hovered a few feet away, hands in her pockets. I did not know what else to write, she said. It is enough, Claire replied. Her gaze dropped to the little Christmas tin beside the cards. It was the same one she had carried in from the storm. Someone had wiped the lid clean. The faded snowflake pattern showed a little clearer. She opened it. Inside, fresh cookies rested on a layer of wax paper. Not all of them were hers. Some were shaped like trees with uneven green frosting. Some were sugar cookies dusted with colored crystals. One was burnt at the edge. Everybody added one, Jessie said. Well, almost everybody. The coffee machine did not contribute. Claire's shoulders lifted on a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. She took one of the less symmetrical cookies, broke it in half, and handed the other piece to Jessie. As long as they are sweet, she said, it counts. Jessie accepted it carefully, as if the cookie weighed more than it did. Later, when there was a lull and the charts were up to date, Claire walked down the east hallway. The display case stood under its flickering light. Her old white coat hung inside on a form that did not quite fit its shape. The frayed cuffs, the faint coffee stain, the empty badge clip. The crooked scrap of paper that read, the uniform of humility. Someone had straightened the paper since it was first taped. It sat a little more level now. A faint green reflection from a nearby monitor washed across the glass, haloing the coat. Claire stood there for a while, hands loose at her sides. She did not think of ceremonies or parades. She thought of the nights she had walked through these halls with sore feet and empty pockets and a head full of ghosts nobody else could see. She thought of the board with its names and the way her own had never meant much on it until now. After a time, she turned back toward the ER. Outside, snowflakes had returned small and soft, drifting past the windows in slow spirals. They landed on ledges and melted into the older layers, indistinguishable once they disappeared. At the nurse's station, a monitor blinked. A call light chimed from room 9. Someone groaned down the hall. Claire picked up a chart, its edges already soft from handling, and slid it onto the top of the stack. She rolled her shoulders, once flexed her hands, and walked toward the sound of the next person who needed her. The overhead lights shone on her badge. Claire Monroe, RN, Emergency Department. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.